Good evening and welcome to episode 22 of the Third and Short Overtime podcast. I was about to say that Mark will join us soon, but look at that perfect timing. Mark's here with Bones and JP as we discuss the week 5 talking points. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself. Week 5 talking points, and we've got some good ones this week. I'm looking forward to jumping in and discussing some of the topics that we've got on stock up, stock down, and we're also introducing the MVP race. I think it's the perfect time. There's some standout candidates at the moment, and quite a handful. So we'll dive into them as well. But obviously, first off, since Mark was nearly late, I'm going to start off with him and say, what thoughts from week 5? I know me and you went down to London and watched the game. Is there anything that you saw that you caught up on? Anything?
Yeah, I didn't get to watch an awful lot of this week. Obviously, I was in London, but I feel like I've got to comment on how much I enjoyed the game this week. I know there was some bad press from some of the Sky pundits, around people throwing cups and things like that. But from everything that I saw, it was a really good atmosphere. There was lots and lots of fans from all franchises there. I think that there was mostly Dolphins fans there, wasn't there, Jordan? The Dolphins are well supported in the UK. But it was nice to be at a game that went right down to the last second as well. So yeah, it was a really good week. I didn't get to watch as much football as I wished. But I'll tell you what else I will touch on as well. How great is primetime football at the moment? Like NFL, obviously they can't predict this when they're picking the schedule. But it seems like every single primetime game's just been if you take Thursday night football out the agenda, because nobody really watches Thursday night football, do they? Unless it's your team playing. But the actual primetime games, I'm thinking Monday Night Football has been unreal this season.
How many overtimes have we had in total this season? Does anyone actually know? Because it feels like it's been more than ever before.
It feels like a few a week, doesn't it?
You just beat me to the punch there, Bones. I was gonna say, like, it just feels like every single game's either an overtime game or someone going down the field to try and tie a game up or try and take the lead, or it just, like you said, it seems so many close games compared to the last few years. Obviously with how many games that I always get some good games, but it just seems that we've been. I hope it doesn't go downhill for me, and we've talked about it, but it just seems like we've been really trekked to some beautiful games, at the moment. JP, I know your team was on a bye this week, were they?
Yeah, this was the best week of the season so far for me. I think the NFL this year is making mugs of us all, to be honest. It feels like every week there's like a contradictory, we do analysis all the time, and then it feels like the week after we get made to look absolute idiots. We were all talking the Chargers up last week. They got absolutely battered by the Ravens. Wasn't anticipating that. We were talking up the Bills, the Titans beat that. It's mad at the moment. It's a really fun season. I don't think there's a team. There's a couple of teams that are obviously on top, but I don't think anybody's really emerged as unbeatable. It really does look like one of those seasons where, there's like 6 to 7 top teams, but they're all capable of beating each other, and it makes it really unpredictable. And you're right, the primetime games are a really good example of that. Sticking the big name teams together, and we're seeing some cracking games. I can't wait for the rest of the season. And if the playoffs are half this good, it's going to be an incredible end. That's for sure.
That's a good point, that, JP, because I was thinking about this the other day. I was actually thinking about this today. Normally by this stage, you've got some real candidates, and I've got more candidates on the NFC side than I have on the AFC side. So I'm thinking Dallas Cowboys are definitely going into the playoffs. I'm thinking Tampa Bay are definitely going into the playoffs, and Green Bay are definitely going into the playoffs. Who's going in between the Rams and the Cardinals out of your NFC East? And then one will have a wild card. And I'm then thinking, who are going to get the other 2 wild cards in the NFC? Is it going to be the Chicago Bears? Is it the Minnesota Vikings? Do the 49ers still feel like they can put something together and get into it? And then I'm looking at the AFC side, and I'm like, okay, then we got the Baltimore Ravens who got beat by the Raiders, but are probably now the best record, at least, in the AFC. But also, they've got Ronnie Stanley, who's just got out injured. The Browns seem to be falling apart at the seams. The Bengals have come up from nowhere. You've got the Raiders doing well, the Chargers doing well until last week. And it just seems like trying to pick teams who are going to go to the playoffs at this moment in time seems really difficult, you know?
Yeah, it's like JP said, I think it's kind of making a fool of us, you know, like trying to say, well, Chargers look like a team that are going to playoffs, and they obviously still could, but they just get beat by the Ravens. And it wasn't long ago where the Ravens were sorry to bring it up, Bones, but it's just a very good point that they only scraped past the Lions, who were out of a win, and that's how crazy this season's been. You know, it's I hope it continues like this, because it's just going to be so much fun. Bones, week 5, what did you like the look of?
I mean, it's like you said, it's been such a competitive year. There's been so many fantastic games. I think the thing about that Ravens game that they only just beat us, I think the Ravens, with all those running back issues, have taken a little bit to get rolling. I think, it is a very much run first offense that lost their top 3 running backs right at the start of the year, and they're a playoff contender for the last few years, aren't they? It's not that much of a shock that they beat the Chargers. They are both good teams, I suppose. The Titans-Bills Monday night game was absolutely mint, I thought. I know we're going to touch on it in a bit, but that was one of those games where it's it had 7 lead changes. It was so back and forth. It was fantastic. Yeah, that's it. Like you say, people holding their own. The Patriots held in against the Cowboys this week, and the Cowboys have been looking absolutely phenomenal. Who knows? It's like this, Urban said, I think, earlier this year, you're playing Bama every Sunday. It's any given Sunday in this league, and it goes to show that we can know as much as we want, but the any given Sunday thing still applies.
Yeah, exactly right, Bones. So before we get into stock up and stock down, we were back on it this week after last week, but we've got to discuss. Obviously, it's not gone through yet, and obviously it's all rumours, but it looks like it's possible. But we've got to discuss the Watson trade, and obviously mentioned Tua maybe not going to the Texans, but like a 3-team trade, maybe it's a 2-team trade. But I'll come to you first, Mark, because I'll go you. Sorry, JP, I'll go to you first. I'm just going to throw it out there and say it depends what it is, because I'm not sure about this for Miami. If they give up too much from the table when already starting to rebuild, I know they've started poor this year, but if they give too much up for Watson, is he going to be capable enough for what they've got there to move him forward over the next few seasons? And obviously with the legal stuff hanging over him.
I mean, you have to start there, really. We don't really know what the outcome is going to be. I think as a team, you would have to be very, very confident that, that things are going to clear. We've obviously talked about it before on the pod. I know there's some, quite strong views that the NFL doesn't really, as long as you win it, doesn't really care. And I think there is some truth in that. But it feels very, to me, this feels very ownership driven. I don't think this is coming from Brian Flores or anybody on the football side. I think this is Stephen Ross getting involved. The team obviously haven't started well. There was some high expectations after last year. Tua, I don't actually think Tua's played that badly, but he's still showing signs of that injury proneness that's followed him around. I can see why they'd do it, but it's a lot to give up potentially. I haven't heard any sort of talk of what the compensation might end up being, but if it's around what they were talking about in the summer, it's going to be quite a high compensation, I think. And I don't know. You'd have to be really confident that the team's there. I do think there are some good elements. They got some good receivers. They got a good tight end. The O-line's an absolute bin fire, to use a term that gets used on this podcast quite a bit. So I do kind of wonder about that. It's kind of an all or nothing move, but I think they're in that mode. I think they thought they were going to be a much better team. What are they? Are they 1-5 now? I think after the way they've started this year, that they obviously thought they were going to be in a much better position. This feels a bit like I don't know. It's a bit of a Hail Mary, really. It's just like, yeah, let's go for it. Intrigued to see if it does happen. And if it does happen, is he going to play straight away? That's my first question. There's still all the stuff hanging over him. He's not officially suspended by the league, I don't think. I think the Texans have been deactivating him. So you would have to think if he gets traded, he's going to play straight away. That's good. That could be a really interesting storyline to follow. I kind of hope it happens because it would just add to the madness that is this season so far.
Yeah, well, what we know is this is what we know so far. Houston are not interested in Tua. So it's going to be a 3-way trade. The teams which are interested in taking Tua, at the moment, it looks like Washington are going to be wanting to take Tua. What else do we know? Well, we know that the league aren't going to suspend Watson whilst he's under investigation. Because he's been under investigation for 7 months. So if they were going to suspend him, they would have done it by now. And all the precedent of the league is to suspend after the incident. So we know that. What else do we know? Well, we know that Watson's not on IR and he's not holding out. He's getting paid the full amount of money of that large contract that he's getting paid, minus his appearance fee and minus his like bonuses for games and all that stuff. So we know that the Texans aren't really keen to play him no matter what, despite paying him a large amount of money. So what you've got is you've got a player that a team clearly doesn't want, who's on a lot of money. You've got a team who is not married, it doesn't seem, to the quarterback that they have. Now, what I noticed in London when I was down in London this weekend and getting to watch Tua more is one, just how, when you compared Tua to Trevor Lawrence, who was on the other side, Lawrence was dead smooth with his footwork, eyes down the field, almost took everything like a robot. Tua's a bouncer. He makes it look very, he made pressure look like he was always messy. And that's why his long distance accuracy suffered for it. He doesn't look smooth in the pocket at all. He looks like he's on his toes. He's a bouncer. It's almost like he bounces around the place as opposed to shuffle and slides. I just think that the Miami Dolphins have had a season to have a look at Tua. They then lost Tua to injury and had a bit of a chance to look at Brissett. And what they realised was that the drop-off between Brissett and Tua wasn't that great at all, which brought into question, is Tua going to really lead this franchise going forward? After all, he's just at Brissett level, and Brissett's not good enough. So I think what they've kind of done is they've come to this assumption now and they've went, okay, now's the time to get off Tua while there's some trade value left. I don't know what it would cost to get Tua, as much as I don't know what it would cost to get Deshaun Watson. But what I do know is that the trade stock for both of those players is now lower than it was at the start of the season, which begs me to ask the question, if Houston had no intention of playing Watson, but were paying him all this money, why did they not trade him at the start of the year when the stock was higher? Because all they've done by not playing him for six games is shown that he's not part of their franchise. So anybody who's coming in to trade for him now knows, well, they don't want them. We know they're going to take less than what they were going to get before. And I think the same says for the Dolphins, because now teams know that the Dolphins have had Tua and don't fancy him much and he's not that good. So whereas Tua might have fetched the first at the end of the year, I don't think he's going to get that either. So it just seems like if the Dolphins were going to do it, why didn't they not do it sooner? Sorry, Bones, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, I think if you're trying to work out a logical answer to the Texans' choices surrounding their roster over the last couple of years, you're going to give yourself an aneurysm. Like, who knows what the direction of that team is right now? They're an absolute mess. No wonder this has happened to them. Like, they couldn't make a good decision if they tried, I don't think, at this point. Texans organization, for those who don't know, is run by some pastor, basically, at this point. It seems like it's an absolute nonsense franchise. I feel sorry for its fans, but it's going to be a tricky one for them, isn't it? Because at some point, he's probably getting suspended. Like, it looks like at this point. At some point. Like you say, the precedent seems to be is for after it's settled. But then 22 different cases is fairly unprecedented, even by the NFL's standards for people getting charged with things. It is a lot at once. But no, I think that is going to affect his draft stock as well, sure, or his trade stock as well. Surely, is at some point this guy is going to be out for several games due to a suspension, however many games it ends up being, and when it ends up being is yet to be seen. But you got to imagine the Dolphins are getting something. Like you say, A, his stock's gone down already at this point, but B, that's still hanging over him. They must be getting a bit of a bargain for him to even be thinking about it. It's only 2 years ago that Dolphins fans were screaming tank for Tua, and now they're looking for a trade a year and a half in. The franchise looks... I mean, the fans must feel like... frustrated, I guess would be the best way to put it. Like, it looks like a bit of a joke move by the Dolphins at this point and a waste of their own time. So I don't know what either of these franchises playing at, and hopefully the trade works out for them. But go ahead, Mark.
I think that with Tua, I think what you expect nowadays from a top 10 quarterback is you expect somebody who can come in and make it work straight away. What's evidence about Tua is he hasn't been able to do that. That's why he was starting Fitzpatrick last year. You know what I mean? Look, Tua's came in and is still struggling at the same things last year as he did this year. I mean, he hasn't had the best protection in the pocket. I mean, in fact, that's an understatement. He's had lousy protection in the pocket. You know what I mean? Though? But he doesn't look smooth under pressure. He doesn't look good under pressure. And the other thing is, as well as is intermediate to deep throwing is way off, way inaccurate. You know what I mean? Though, like he's poor at them. He's poor at it. And that's not what we saw in Bama. Now, I don't know if this is a result of his hip surgery. I imagine that if you wanted to sling the ball 40 yards, you're having to put quite a lot of rotation on that hip. You know, I don't know if this is something to do with that. But this isn't what they thought he was coming out of college. I don't really think it's what anybody thought he was going to be coming out of college. At this point, he looks developmental. Whereas everybody thought he was going to be the complete thing coming out, you know?
Bama quarterback, so isn't it? He played in a system that should have meant he was ready. And like you say, whether it's the hip surgery and he needs to slowly build back up into it or what, but surely someone saw these things. Like, something is causing this. If this didn't happen at college, there's a problem somewhere. Surely it's not. It can't all be on to it as much as he's cack-handed.
Just a quick one. I'll throw it back to you, Mark, just before we move on to stock up. Obviously, we saw with Sam Darnold, who was in a bad situation. You know, like he's moved on. Obviously, he didn't play as well this weekend, even though a lot of the receivers had a lot of drops. I watched that game, but is Tua in the right place? Could he benefit from moving on?
Look, Washington, it depends what the team. I can't imagine Washington are going to be given a 1 from. No way. You know what I mean? No, not where they are. You know, I know it's not really a good quarterback class, but you're still not wanting to burn a 1 on 2 at this stage. Not after what you've seen. I think what you'd be looking at is you'd be looking at more what Josh Rosen went for. What did Josh Rosen go to Miami for in the end? Did he go for a 2? So that's what you're probably talking about. You're probably talking about Josh Rosen money, which will be a 2. At this stage for Washington, it's worth it giving a 2. You know what I mean? Giving a 2 for 2 hours, then taking another round 2 quarterback, knowing what the history of round 2 quarterbacks are. I can only really name 1 or 2 round 2 quarterbacks who have been any decent. And I'm thinking Garoppolo and I'm thinking Derek Carr. You know what I mean? And both of them have arguably been not the guy at different points, although one of them has shown that he is. It's worth it for Washington if they're going to give a 2 to have a look at Tua. Maybe a change of scenery will do better for him. Maybe if he adds some protection, he might do better. But I don't know if it's a fix-it remedy. You know, because Washington are as vertical as any other team in the NFL. You know, they like to go vertical. They like to send Terry McLaurin deep. You know, they like to sell Brown deep and stuff like that. They've got Curtis Samuel. Do you know what might work better for him if he did go to Washington? Have more faith in the Washington run offense than I have in the Dallas and then in the Miami run offense. So what I'm thinking is Tua will have a running game to complement him. And maybe Washington might think, well, we'll use him more as a game manager type. I'm not too sure. He's worth having a look at for a second, isn't he, really? Given the background of second-round quarterback picks.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, we have like Russell Wilson were around 3 pick. You can get him. So if you can get if you can trade a second for him, like I say, look at what Washington have got, and like you said, if you don't want, I don't think you should wait. What do you think Washington are going to pick? Maybe top 10. You know, like 5 to 10 at the way it's going at the moment. I know there's Matt Corral and stuff there, and maybe you can get them there. But the defensive players and stuff like that, you might as well take a chance on them. But that's another story. We'll move on to. We'll be here all night if we talk about draft 2022. We'll move on to stock up, and we have got Derrick Henry first. He will be in the Heisman, talking about college, the MVP race. But I think he needs a lot more time talking about him and what he's done this year so far. You know, if you look at his stats, you know, obviously he didn't start as well against Arizona, but since the Arizona game, he's had 5 plus 100-yard games, 182 against Seattle. Obviously, I've talked about their run defense, but it's just a one-man team at the moment. Like Tannehill's obviously had his injury problems with the wide receivers, you know, like obviously Jones and stuff, but he's had to rely on Derrick Henry so much, and he's carried this team. I know, Bones, you're a massive running back fan. What a season he's had, and he's on for big numbers if he can carry on like this, you know, setting records. I know it's with an extra game, but what a player.
It's funny, isn't it? Like we talked about fullbacks last week, and Derrick Henry being, you know, a bit similar, being a giant 250-pound dude that, as we saw this week, runs 21.5 miles an hour, like at 6 foot odd, 250 pounds. Like the dude's unreal. But what we saw again, and I mean, you hit the nail on the head. He's there right now. He's their whole team, and that I still think that's going to come back to bite them in the long term in this day and age of the league. Is they're struggling to get stuff going in other places. The receiving game was better this week, don't get me wrong, but it still feels like it's a lot on Henry's back. And obviously it's going to be, he's a very good player, but it's almost too much to put on one player. You need to be able to alleviate some of that. But I mean, he's on track for another ridiculous year, I think, at this point. He's going to break 2,000 yards again easily. He's, you know, but you saw it in this game where what Henry does is it's not necessarily comes online in the first quarter. It's not even necessarily comes online in the second quarter, but that third and fourth quarter when everyone's knackered and no one wants to tackle a 260-pound, 21-mile-an-hour running dude, like that's when Henry comes into play, and it has been working for them in the recent weeks. But I know Mark wanted to say something. So
Derrick Henry's the outlier for everything that I say. So what I say is you can't have a bell cow running back. The myth about running backs getting better as you go into the fourth quarter is a lie. What you need is a running back who's fresh in the fourth quarter to be successful. I'll say that running backs don't get better as the season goes on. And if you've used a running back heavily in the season, he'll struggle when it comes to the playoffs. Unless he's called Derrick Henry. You know what I mean? And Derrick Henry obliterates all of those facts I've just mentioned there. Derrick Henry does get better the more touches you give him, as opposed to getting worse. Derrick Henry does get better in the fourth quarter, regardless of how much he's being used in the early part of the game. Derrick Henry could keep this pace going all the way through the season. He's just an anomaly. He's just an outlier. He's just a unicorn. There's very few players who are unicorns in their positions. I would say Josh Allen, who's the quarterback for the Bills, is a 245-pound quarterback, is a unicorn. Cam Newton, in his prime, was a unicorn. Tyreek Hill is a unicorn. You know, somebody who's that fast, who can do it at all levels, high point, all sorts of stuff. Derrick Henry, Aaron Donald is a unicorn. You know what I mean? These are unicorn players who aren't often replicated, or it's very difficult to find a replication for them for what they do. And that's what Derrick Henry is. He's just a unicorn. He's a rare breed and a rare talent. These kind of players will not come along very often at all in the NFL. He doesn't need a committee. He doesn't need resting. He can carry the ball 30 times a game, and his last carry will be just as good as his first carry. You know what I mean? He's just one of those unicorns, freak of nature. I don't know how better to describe it. You know what I mean? No, he's just...
He weighs as much and moves as fast as a small moped. Like, who wants to tackle that? Like,
and that's the thing. In the fourth quarter, you know, when he's still bringing it. And if you're a defensive back, you're like, oh, God, I don't have to fancy tackle. You know what I mean? It must be disheartening to still have to tackle this guy. You know, like, you know, because what you're used to is you're used to seeing running backs slow down in those periods. And then the spell back coming in the fourth quarter and taking over. Yeah, look, let's enjoy him. You know, as fans of the NFL, let's just enjoy Derrick Henry because it'll be a long time before another one comes about, you know?
Before JP jumps in, you were saying no one to tackle him. Micah Hyde will tackle him. He'll take him down. He'll have a good go. I'll have to bring him up because most safeties would have moved out of the way, but Micah Hyde definitely put his body on the line. So I just thought I'd bring that up and give him a shout out because I wouldn't have done it. So
he got burned a little bit on that 76-yard run though.
He did. But even when Henry cut in and it was like a gazelle and a tiger facing each other, I would have been out of there. I'd be like, nah, I'll leave this. You know,
I'd be dead 3 times over, wouldn't I? I'd have been snapped in half.
Sorry, JP, I just had to get that in.
No, it's all right. I mean, you've all covered it really well. I think he genuinely is a bit of a one-off of a player. Can't think of many running backs that are so good so consistently. I think it shows how bad the NFL is at evaluating running backs in a lot of ways. This guy was a second-round pick. You know, we've seen a lot of hype around running backs. There's nobody is consistently good as Henry right now. There are some very good backs out there, but there's nobody that takes on as much load and does as much as he's doing right now. I do think, you kind of touched on it yourself, I think, Jordan, he's kind of papering over the cracks a bit for Tennessee. They're not where they were last year offensively. Tannehill's not playing at the same level. I don't think the whole team is really. He's having to kind of drag them out of trouble. He's doing it, but it's very much on his shoulders at the minute. They're fortunate to have him. But I think the thing is, a good running back, especially if your offense isn't playing that well, will keep you in games because you can control the time of possession. You can stay on the field a bit longer, give your defense a rest. You know, these are all things that are important. But then again, he occasionally busts out a 73-yard touchdown. So, I mean, he's just about everything you'd want in a running back for a top team. I think he's going to carry them further than they probably should be going without the playing at the moment. But yeah, how can you not be impressed with him? Jeez, he's an incredible football player.
Yeah, he definitely backs up Mark's argument of do not draft a running back in the first round, but what you can get in the second. You know, he preaches that for days. We're going to come back to Mark because we'll go with this one first. We're going to come back to you, Mark. Raiders receivers, you wanted this one in there, so I'm going to give it to you. You know, the second year ones, it's all yours, would it?
Yeah, the Raiders, at the start of the season, the Raiders made a gamble. They took these 2 lads in the draft last year, Brian Edwards and Henry Ruggs. Neither of them really were brilliant, I would say, in year one. You could see what Ruggs' ceiling could be. You know, like I was saying, he could be like a Brandon Cooks kind of player. You know, that's the kind of role I could envisage someone like Ruggs filling in and becoming like a Brandon Cooks type pro. You know, who was a good player who would, you know, make big plays and get touchdowns. But he was a junior coming out and he was the first wide receiver taken last year, ahead of CD Lamb, ahead of Justin Jefferson, ahead of Jerry Jeudy, you know, like ahead of Pittman. You know, all these players who in their first year actually did better than him. So, and we had Nelson Aguilar, who had just had a really good season. And we had Edwards. Edwards had about 5 catches last year and had about 46 yards. But what the Raiders did in the offseason is they went, we're not going to re-sign Aguilar. They did bring in John Smokey Brown. They did they kept Zay Jones and they got Willie Snead in. But really what they said is they went, we're going to trust these young 2 players. Despite not really seeing a lot of evidence that they could be that trusted this early in their career. So the Raiders gambled. And to be honest with you, it looks like it's totally paying off. Do you have the stats that I give you on these bones in the thread? So I put a tweet up on Twitter earlier on this week. And it was about the Raiders receiving stats. Look at Henry Ruggs at the top. 20 receptions this year, 445 yards, a 22.3 average, and 2 TDs. That average leads the NFL this year. His average per catch leads the NFL this year. Let's go down to the bottom where Edwards is. 15 receptions, 303 yards, a 20.2 average. They're getting phenomenal production out of these two young wide receivers. Ruggs has really made a jump. He's came back about 20 pounds heavier. And I'll tell you week in, week out, what's impressed me with Ruggs. One is ability to get off press now. He can get off press. He's really physical. Two, his route running is brilliant. To be honest with you, there's an argument that Ruggs could command more volume at this moment in time. His route running's been so good on a short and intermediate level. Just Derek Carr hasn't keyed into him because he's too keyed in on Waller and Renfrew in those areas. But the truth is that there's probably catches left on the table for Ruggs, and he could really probably become an 8 or 9 catch a game player if only, well, I suppose Derek Carr at some point, because he'd be watching the same old 22 tape that I'm watching. And I'm guessing Derek Carr sees Henry Ruggs just as open as I do on short and intermediate routes. At the moment, we use him predominantly deep, but there is a lot of scope to bring him further down. Edwards has been fantastic too. Now we're in a decision because we know the EFC race is a bit higgledy-piggledy. No one's really separating themselves. The EFC West is wide open and we haven't won that conference since we went to the Super Bowl. So, you know what I mean? It's been a long time, that division. You're going to have players who are available for trade now. There's talk about OBJ being available for trade from the Browns. He hasn't been put out there yet, but there's talk of him being available. You've got to think that Brandon Cooks might be available, you know, from the Houston Texans. Do the Raiders go out and get one of them players? Personally, I would love to have OBJ on the Raiders team. And it'll make sense as well because at the end of this year, there's no guaranteed money left for him in Cleveland, which means they're probably going to cut him. And he's going to cost £15 million a season, which isn't too bad these days for a wide receiver. And you could restructure that. So they're going to cut him off season. So a third pick might get him. Personally, I would say, I know we're meant to be developing Edwards. I know we're meant to be developing, but he's a second-year pro. If there's an upgrade available today that puts you in a Super Bowl window, arguably, or an AFC window, take it. There'll still be a role for Ruggs and Edwards later on in year 3 and year 4 of his career. But yeah, look, the Raiders gambled on these two. And wow, is it paying off? Ruggs looks fantastic at the moment.
Yeah, I've been proper impressed with Ruggs this year. Feels like every time I look up, Ruggs is making some sort of highlight play for you guys. But he's doing the tough stuff as well, which is the bit that if I was a predicting guy, I would have said that would be the bit that would come hardest to him. He's obviously a supremely talented athlete, can get deep very easily, but I didn't think he would be the short to intermediate guy. As you say, he's not really seen the volume there yet, but the fact that he's getting open in those situations is a big thing. That's something a lot of receivers of his sort of size and stature don't do when they come into the league. Renfrew I've always liked anyway. I think he's a really good player. Edwards is a surprise to me. I knew nothing about him before the season. He's had a really good season so far. I think you've got the elements of a really successful offense as it is now in the NFL. You've got your sort of your speed type, your possession type, your good slot player in Renfrew, obviously, and then you've got the tight end that can sort of be a movable piece anyway in Waller. We've talked about Waller before. I think he's kind of unique in the top tight end discussions. He's a very, very he's almost one of those unicorn type players, as you would say, Mark. You know, he's a really talented guy. I think there's some real good talent on that offense right now. Regards to the OBJ stuff, I mean, it's hard to turn down a player of that caliber, isn't it? I always find it a bit strange when like top players are available and fans say things like, "Oh, we don't need him. We're developing X player." It's like there's a reason that these players are as known as they are. OBJ is the kind of player that if you were in the playoffs could be the difference between a win and a loss. You know, he's capable of making those plays. There aren't many of those players out there. So I think if one's available and you've got the capital, and to be honest, we know how you feel about how the Raiders draft. Maybe there's no issue with giving up some draft capital to go and get someone like OBJ, especially if, as you say, it's a mid-round pick. Like, what are you losing with a mid-round pick? I think we talk about this when we do the draft stuff as well. A lot of them don't develop into anything. If you can get a proven commodity at that price, I think you'd be mad not to. But yeah, I think you're coming along really well. That offense in general is looking really good at the moment.
Yeah, I think he probably would be a third, John, because look, the Browns have got no dead cap next year on that OBJ, so they're probably going to cut him rather than pay him $15 million. And the league probably knows this. Listen, the Patriots, and Belichick has made a living out of trading for good vets at the end when, and taking them on, and bringing them in. And people go, how come they got him for a fifth? It's because the team are going to get nothing from, later on. They might get a compensatory pick, but do they really want to wait a year for that compensatory pick? I guess what the Raiders are saying, or what I would say is, we'll give you a third now from. The chances are in free agency, once you cut him, he'll go somewhere else, and you'll probably get a third compensatory pick from somebody else. But that'll be a year or two down the line. We'll give you it now up front. And we know that their middle rounds are a lottery. The Raiders had 3 third-round picks a couple of years ago, and 2 of them aren't on the roster anymore. So for me, it's a no-brainer option to go, let's take OBJ, who still has an awful lot of talent. He'll have his pick of franchises almost if he does get cut, if he is dangled out there on a trade. But look at it, for me, it would somebody of that ability would put the Raiders over the top, and it would definitely put us in the AFC West hunt. And possibly, who knows, once you're in the playoffs and you've got an offense that good, you can blow any team away. You know what I mean, John?
He's dreaming again, isn't he? He's dreaming. He's Gruden's gone. The dream is alive again. So,
would you like the matchup against that offense?
No.
If you had Ruggs on one side, OBJ on the other, you had Waller, you had Renfro, you have Edwards, you've got the 2 running backs out the backfield. You know what I mean? If you were a defensive coordinator, would you want to match up against that offense?
Have I got Seahawks defense?
You can have any defense.
Because if it's Seahawks defense, I don't want to match up against anyone, to be honest with you.
Yeah, same with the Lions defense. But I'd kill to have any of those wide receivers in our locker room right now, to be honest. But not going to happen.
No, you have got a good bunch there, though. But I just saw the eyes glimmer, Mark. It went down a bit on it for the last few weeks, but you're bright again, aren't you? So, but I totally agree. I think the offense has been a bright spark, and now obviously we talk in chat, and you obviously know your Raiders, and you say now Gruden's gone. Hopefully, it can flourish even more. Now, and it seemed like it did on Sunday. I didn't see the game, but it seemed like it did. And going forward, let's hope for you that it carries on like this. It'll be good for you to watch. It's fun anyway.
It was a much improved performance by the Raiders. Tell you what it was, our play action increased. We went from being one of the lowest play action teams over the period with Gruden to instantly having over 25% play action plays on the weekend. There was a lot more mid-zone running as opposed to all inside zone running. We got to see Drake used as a pass catcher, which is what I thought would sign him for, but what we weren't using him. But he came in as a pass catcher and got a touchdown, on a lovely wheel route. It just looked refreshed. It just looked new. It looked like Gruden had come out, and instantly it looked new. And it looked modern, as opposed to looking old and looking dated. I don't think that Gruden, we all know how egocentric that man is and how married he is to his playbook. Greg Olson's not the same. Greg Olson can go, well, I'm not married to your playbook. I'll bring in what's working well with Swift or with, let's have a look at what outside zone was working well with the 49ers and what concepts they bring into their running games. And I think we saw a little bit of that already. You know what I mean? With the Raiders, we saw a bit of Kevin Stefanski play action pass. We saw an RPO. Fucking saw an RPO with Carr. You know what I mean? It's it just looked chalk and cheese. It didn't look massively different, but it looked considerably different straight away,
Moving on to obviously mentioned Derek Carr is having a good season. We've gone to the final stock up. We have got Kirk Cousins and Trevor Lawrence. I just wanted to throw. Obviously, we've talked a lot about Kirk Cousins not in the chat, But I just wanted to throw Trevor Lawrence in there, and we'll come on to him in a minute because me and, like, obviously I know Bones watched him, and me and Mark were down there watching him, and we were just in awe of him, to be honest with you, down there, his footwork and stuff. But I know, JP, you watched Kirk Cousins this weekend, but even before that, I know he's having I don't know where it's come from, to be honest with you, but he's having a fantastic season.
Yeah, he's a real up and down quarterback. He has been all his career, but when he goes on these streaks like he is now, he's the kind of quarterback that'll kill you as a coach, because for short spells of seasons he'll look like an absolute world beater. And right now he's probably having one of his best spells, certainly since he went to the Vikings, definitely since he got that contract that he got from them. Yeah, kind of sneaked up on me, really. I threw him in for stock up this week because I've kind of been keeping a bit of an eye on the Vikings, and some weeks they don't look a particularly good team, and then suddenly they seem to have really hit the stride. Really impressed with what he's doing. I think you can see why teams have been interested in him in the past. There's always been rumours that Shanahan wanted him. There's always been rumours that other teams were in for him. He had a good spell at Washington. The guy's a talented quarterback. He's just capable of meltdowns. We haven't seen any yet, and I think what they're doing at the minute is trying to take a bit of that pressure away from him. But you can't argue with the stats. That was a pretty good Carolina defense he was playing against this weekend, and he took them apart. Now, some of that was the O-line. I'll come on to that in a sec. But anytime you're standing back there, you're throwing for nearly 400 yards passing, and you're scoring 34 points. You're doing a pretty good job. As a football team, but he's really leading the charge at the minute. He's it sounds crazy to say it, but he's on current form. He's one of the top QBs in the league, and it kind of follows a bit of a pattern that we've been seeing this year. Derek Carr is often much maligned as well. He's had a hell of a season. It's these sort of middle tier QBs that suddenly seem to be having these really good 5-6 game runs. I'm really intrigued to see what they do the rest of the season. There's some real good experience and talent there on that Vikings team. It was just a question of if they could actually pull it together. If he keeps playing like that, they're a threat. I think Mark said before about potentially a wild card in the NFC. Yeah, that seems about their level to me at the minute. But if that is the case, they won't be easy to play against once it comes to playoff time.
Good. That defense was a good defense. I wanted to see how he did against Carolina in particular, because whilst he's been putting up good stats, he has been putting them up on pretty average pass defenses, as in Arizona, Seattle, Detroit. He's played all those defenses, and they're not renowned for their secondaries, you know what I mean? Especially not Detroit, sorry, Bones. Or Arizona, or Seattle, for that fact. What I would see is this Carolina defense is fucking good. You know what I mean? Number 2 ranked overall, with the number 1 ranked pass defense it was coming into this game. And Kirk Cousins went out there and put 373 yards on them with a completion average of 69%, 3 touchdowns, and he had a quarterback rating of 112. And that was against a good pass defense. So this is really a big, big performance by Kirk Cousins. A really big performance by Kirk Cousins. I didn't see it coming. I thought he would have struggled there. But no, he went out there and absolutely balled out, and deserves some credit for it, because he had been doing well, but there was the question of, well, look who they've played. You know what I mean? Quarterbacks should be doing well against them secondaries. But to do it against this Carolina D, who were good. You know what I mean? Yeah, well done, Kirk Cousins. Fully deserved the praise, lad.
Yeah, like I say, he put up some decent numbers against, like you mentioned, some bad teams. But I liked how he got the ball in overtime, and he drove up and won him the game as well. Took command of it, and it were a good performance. I just want to see if he can keep up. Like JP mentioned, he's one of them quarterbacks who can be brilliant on his day, but he also can. You won't be surprised if the next 3 or 4 games where he just goes off the boil. Obviously, hopefully for Vikings, he can keep it up, because they've got some good talent on offense there. So it'll be interesting to see. And obviously, we threw in Trevor Lawrence because, like I said, I'll come to you first, Bones, before I go to Max. Me and Mark watched him down there. It's got that different feel of it when you're watching a full game out there. Totally. I wish I could go and watch a game every weekend. You see the full pitch, moving all of his footwork. The offensive line did him no favors most of the time. Just how he just breezed out of it. But I know you watched him. He's on a bad team at the moment, but he really is a special player.
brilliant. He was brilliant. Is it me? Sorry, yeah. He was brilliant. His footwork was it's just beautiful. He just looks like he's on a joystick gliding around that pocket, and the way he keeps his eyes downfield and the ball high, and it's just, you can see every bit, watching him in the flesh, you can see every single bit of why he was so lauded. Look, this win was down to Trevor Lawrence. I don't know what Urban Meyer was doing. We watched that game, didn't we? And what happened is they completed a throw and then let 15 minutes run off the clock before they called a timeout. And they called a timeout at like 5 seconds left. And I was like, what are they doing? They're running it down so in case they don't get this fourth down. But look, there was like 15 minutes. There was like 15 seconds on the clock. And Miami had one timeout. They weren't going to do now. And somehow with 5 seconds left on the clock, Trevor Lawrence was able to find, I think it was Laviska Shenault, get the yardage they needed to put them into field goals so they could kick the field goal in the last second. Urban Meyer tried to toss the game. Trevor Lawrence actually won it for them. You know what I mean? This win was on Lawrence. He was brilliant in that last drive. And to be honest, we've just seen him in the flesh. He's just everything. His footwork and action is just, when you compare him to Tua, who was jittery and bouncing all over the place, he just looked like he glided everywhere. He's going to be a good pro, this kid. Do you know what else went against him? There was a couple of key drops in this game, wasn't there, Jordan? There was a drop by his tight end, Arnold, when at the first possession, when they were in the red zone, which was a third down, and it went straight to Darnold, who dropped it. There was a couple of drops by Shenault. They do his third down percentage no good, but they weren't his errors. They were drops at key times, you know what I mean? Brilliant. He had a brilliant game. He's going to be a superstar.
His percentage may not have been as high, but he had his second best rating game. He threw the most passes, most attempts he has all season. And it looked good. It worked. They threw the ball a lot against that Miami defense, which we've discussed in the past. That Miami defense is predominantly man-to-man defense, quite a good defense as well. We've said in the past. I know Miami's looking kind of bad right now, but it was a really tough, theoretically, defense to go against, and he played absolutely phenomenally. It looks like, to some extent, though, he does seem to have. It feels like he has better games when he's not necessarily trying to or having to chase the lead, so he's not bombing it all the way down the field. You can take a couple of shorter passes and get people in space. My guy Agnew had a nice catch this game. I'd love seeing him get some play. It's nice to see. I said earlier, didn't I? I'd love to see Urban Meyer scheme him into the playbook a bit more. But I think for Lawrence at this point, he must know, mustn't he, that he's going to be there longer than Meyer. Realistically, this is his franchise. It's not Urban Meyer's franchise, is it? Urban Meyer's gone in a year or two max. So I think it's good that he has, like you said, he's taken that responsibility to try and that he won that game for them. Urban didn't. He did, like you said. I think that's good. I think he needs to take that initiative with this team because, like I say, I don't think Urban's hanging around.
Yeah, I think, like you said, Mark, you had some really good throws that were dropped by, I think, a lot of them by Shenault, surprisingly, But it just shows you, if you don't actually watch a game, if you look at Darnold numbers, for Panthers this weekend, he started quite bad, but you look at his numbers, I think he ended up with about 20 something for about 40 something. It's like about 50%, but he had about 5 or 6 drops from Robbie Anderson and things like that. And it can. Just by looking at the numbers, sometimes you can be fooled, and I think that's what it is sometimes with Trevor Lawrence. I think he's been quite consistent with his throwing, but he just needs a bit of help from receivers sometimes. But I agree, it was just good to watch. Someone that composed in the pocket. What was this 6th game? In the NFL with a bad O-line, that doesn't help you. So yeah, it were good to watch. I'm looking forward to watching him again and for many years, and hopefully get some good players around him, whoever's the coach going forward. So moving on to stock down, we'll start with the same match that Trevor Lawrence was in. We'll start with the Dolphins. I'll come back to you, Mark. We as much as we were sat there in awe of Jeff Lawrence, we were sat there looking at how bad the Dolphins were. I know they were missing the top two cornerbacks, there, but I honestly, I'm going to leave it up to you because I can't think of anything good to say about what I saw with the Dolphins. Because it were a bad Jaguars team. Obviously, they made plays against the bad Jaguars defense, but it was just it was cringeworthy sometimes.
There was a few players I was impressed with in this. Ogba, their defensive end, played really well in this game. He managed to do his part. Jalen Phillips might have. He seems to be getting better now in finding his feet as a pass rusher in the NFL. Really though, I mean, the only other standout was Jalen Waddle, who did have to handle an increased workload as the other receivers were out. And he did look really well. I mean, his touchdown on the slant early on was he just out-muscled Nevin Lawson, got in front of him, caught the slant. That was a nice play by him. He got a second touchdown later on in the game, and he looked really good. But yeah, look, the thing is I can't tell the difference between Tua and Brissett at this stage. Having watched Brissett play the Raiders earlier on this year and having watched Tua in the flesh, I don't really know what the difference is between them two quarterbacks. And I guess that's why the Dolphins are keen to move off Tua, because if his level's Brissett level, it's not going to be enough. Look, I don't know what's happening with Miami. I said it earlier on, didn't I? I said Miami are going to get beat this game. They're going to get beat this game. And everything that I said, they're going to get beat this game. James Robinson's going to run over them. All that stuff I was saying came true. You know what I mean? And they're just not what we saw last year. Is their season lost this season now? I'd probably say so. That's a big deficit to come back from. And at the minute, they don't look like they can go on a run of winning 6 or 7 in a row. So it looks like already they're kicking it down to next year. Just for Dolphins fans, it must be disappointing because they were coming in on such a high off the back of a 10-win season last year. But look, this is what happens when your offensive line stays bad. This is what happens when your offensive line stays bad. They traded out of the draft, they traded back. People will say, should they have stayed where they were and should they have took Penny Sewell? You know what I mean? Or that's what people will be saying now, you know what I mean? Because our offensive line is really terrible. It is really poor. And I guess it doesn't really matter who they put back there. I mean, I know that Deshaun Watson made things happen behind the poor Houston offensive line for a lot of years. But unless they get better in the trenches, they're going to continue to struggle. There are some nice players. Christian Wilkins is a good player. Ogba's a good player. I have hope that Jalen Phillips will improve. But yeah, they're probably going to trade Xavier Howard. There's talk of that. I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure where the Dolphins go from this. Do they tear it down and try to build again? They have got draft capital. But yeah, it's got to be disappointing for the fans, hasn't it, really?
No state taxes in Florida. That's pretty much the only reason I can come up with for Deshaun Watson wanting to go there. I can't honestly think of many other reasons. They have a few pieces on the offense. We said that in the open, but my God, I don't know where this team's going. I tweeted pretty much on the final whistle, only the Dolphins could have lost that game, and I kind of stand by that. I don't know what this team is, apart from very bad. It seems strange that they were kind of a playoff team last season. It almost makes me think that they just overperformed and it's raised expectations to a level that they can't match. I mean, I didn't expect them to fall this far, but I think we all expected them to take a step back this year, largely because changing quarterbacks, going from Fitzpatrick to Tua or Brissett, whoever happens to be healthy this week, it's going to have an impact. And I thought they would be a few games worse off, but I didn't expect them to be this bad. And to recover at this stage, I think seems impossible. I think they're going to have to win out really feasibly to have any chance, and they're not going to do that. So, they don't have us on the schedule as far as I know. So I don't think they're going to pick up a cheap win anywhere. But it's it's not a good team. I don't know quite what's happened to them. I don't know if there's more going on behind the scenes. You do start to wonder about, it's another ex-Patriots coach in a head coaching job. We've all seen those crash and burn. even after a good start, although in some cases they didn't even start well. So you do just wonder if there's a little bit, if there's something more going on. And how patient is Stephen Ross going to be? He's known for being a bit of a meddling owner. If I'm Brian Flores, well, yeah, I think I'd be checking my rental agreement in Florida. I wouldn't fire him personally, but I just have a feeling that might be what's coming. Yeah, especially if they continue down this path, it's going to be hard to recover from that.
I know what's happened, John, and I said this to Jordan on the walk to the stadium. They're not getting the turnovers that they got last year. A lot of the wins that they got last year were off the back of the multiple turnovers they were getting in a game. You're going to win games if you're getting 2 or 3 turnovers a game. And the Dolphins got lots of turnovers last year. We've seen this before. Remember the year when Lovie Smith's Chicago Bears went to the playoffs and they went to the Super Bowl with Rex Grossman as quarterback? And then the next year they fell apart. It was because that whole Super Bowl run was made on that defense generating lots and lots and lots of turnovers. We saw it a little bit of a few years back again with the Chicago Bears again, funny enough, when Eddie Jackson, the safety, was doing all the turnovers and Khalil Mack was coming on, you know. A team, it's difficult to sustain 2 or 3 turnovers a game. We might see this with the Cowboys a little bit when we see Trayvon Diggs not making 2 or 3 interceptions a game. When you're not, it's hard to sustain turnovers, but it can inflate a bad team and make them look good when the turnovers are hot. And I think that's what happened to Miami last year. They were really hot at turning the ball over, which actually papered over a bad team and made them look good. What's happened this year is the turnovers have dried up, and what we're actually seeing is that they were a bad team all along, and maybe everybody overestimated them a little bit. It's the turnovers that stopped. That's what's gone wrong with them.
Yeah, it's a fair point, and it's like, yeah, like I said, I didn't really have much good. I know Matt pulling a few good players out, and Jalen Waddle did have a good game, but it's hard to see where. And even the first game they beat, I know the New England out of the same team, but they started off well, and you thought, here we go, but it's just crumbled to pieces, over the last 5 games. So I think it's going to be difficult for them to come back from this. Obviously, they'll have some more wins, but I don't know where. I can't put my finger on where they're going to end up at the end of the season, what wins they will end up on. I don't know the schedule, but it's concerning for the Dolphins. And like you said, the GM there doesn't mess around there, so it'll be interesting to see where they go as well at the end of the season, depending on how bad they play. The record at the end of the season. The next stock down we've got on is officiating, and obviously I've been so annoyed with the unsportsmanlike conduct calls, this season. Some of them are so soft, it's like I'm all for like ridiculous ones, like in your face and like disrespect, but some of them are just absolutely a joke. And I came for the end of my tether with the roughing the passer on Malik Jackson, I think it was, for the Browns, on I can't remember which of the well, you had to see it to believe it. Ridiculous. I know Mark, I feel like for last week or week before, saying if you know you shouldn't touch the passer, you shouldn't rough him if you know. But this, I don't even know if it was just tickling. I don't even know what it. It was a joke. But I'm getting upset about it. We've got a guy here who's really upset about officials, and I'm going to hand him over to Bones because I know you can't wait to talk about these guys in the black and white.
NFL officials suck. Like, that's the truth of the matter. They all, and don't get me wrong, like it must be hard. There's like 20 odd people on the field at any given time. You've got a lot of stuff to watch at once. Like, you're gonna miss some stuff. Like, so I understand when we see missed holding calls, and maybe not so much when they're completely blatant. But this year, for example, they missed a 4-second, maybe 5-second delay of game that led to a game-winning field goal. Like, in the roughing the passer stuff is getting kind of ridiculous. Like you said, I seen the one on Murray, and he didn't even fall over. He took like 3 steps back, and that was it. Like, that was the end of it. And I think, as I said it a few weeks back, and I get what you're saying. There's situations where you should know not to hit the passer, but sometimes these are 300-pound dudes running as fast as they can. It's going to take them a step or two to slow back down, and then there's going to be incidental collisions. People are going to bump into each other, and some of these do feel like it's a case of he couldn't physically have stopped in the amount of time he had to stop. He was going to bump him a little bit. It's unavoidable. And the taunting stuff, I mean, come on. Like, it's a tricky one because it's clearly something the NFL want to get people away from, is taunting directly in the face of other opponents. But it's competitive sports. Trash talk is part of the thing. Like, you can't... I don't think you should ever eliminate trash talk from any competitive sport because that's part of it. Like, if you can't play the mental game, that's your problem. That's like... It's what makes players like Richard Sherman so iconic. Is he might not necessarily have been the fastest corner, but he played an absolute fantastic mental game, getting in his opponent's head, and he'd be called every damn play at this point in this league right now. Like, if he was playing like that, like, he clearly isn't playing like that right now. But if he's playing like Crabtree, Richard Sherman, let's say the Crabtree rant, he'd be fined every damn week. Like, this is ridiculous. And the NFL officials suck. Like, who officiates the officials? Someone needs to start fining these guys, because at most, the week later, they come out with a half-hearted written apology about, oh, we're really sorry that we missed a 5-second delay of game that changed the outcome of a game, but, you know, it's happened now. There's nothing we can do. Sorry about that. Like, something needs to start happening to these guys because they fucking suck at their jobs.
It's a hard job to do, isn't it, though? You know what I mean? We see it's a hard job to do. We saw what happened when the officials went on strike a few years back and they had to get college officials in for a little bit. And then you really saw how bad college officials would be in the NFL. And you realise that actually, although these guys do make mistakes, they're the best of a very bad bunch, like, you know what I mean? Look, the taunting one, I hate. The roughing the passer one's been here that long now, that professional players should just know. I think what it does, right, it takes away the strip, sack, fumble now, because it's almost as if you're going in on the quarterback, you're going to have to go low, because if he throws the ball away and you're going high to spot the ball and you hit him on the helmet, it's going to be a flag. But look, it's not new. It's been around a while now. And I think, look, it's up for D-line coaches to maybe coach their defensive linemen and say, you're going to have to take them low. You're going to have to wrap them up around the waist and not go for the high shot for the ball as much. Think about affecting the pass and getting them down more than going for the strip sack fumble. We'll still see strip sack fumbles. We've probably seen a lot less since this rule's come in. I'd love to see what the statistics are since this rule come in, because players can't just go with a bantam and go to swap the arm for fear of hitting them in the helmet. But look, it's been around a while now. D-line coaches really need to be coaching their players now just to go lower and just to go waist height. You know what I mean? But the taunting one's starting to get on me wick. That's really getting on me wick, that one, Bones. Because I like it. I like the taunting. You know what I mean? I like it. I like it. You know what I mean? And it seems like they have no idea what is taunting now. You know what I mean? No. It just seems silly. But yet you can still do the goal celebrations. Is that not the biggest taunt? You know what I mean? When you're out there dancing in the end zone, especially if you're an away team dancing on the away team's end.
You can taunt the fans. You can't taunt other players, is how it works. It's such a weird situation, because we saw Aaron Rodgers say, I own you. I still fucking own you, to the entire Chicago Bears arena this week. And it's just... Yeah, I agree with you though. I don't like it at all, and I get protecting quarterbacks a little bit more. They are the stars of the show. It's what the NFL wants to sell, but I just don't like the officials, man. They have some crap calls against Detroit every single year, and I hate them all.
Go back to when the officials were on strike for a little bit. Do we a fan then, Bones? Were you?
No, I don't want to go back to that. It's just... They never improve. I'm sick of day-late apologies about game-ruining calls, man. I'm just tired of it. Look at the Marvin Jones catch last year, like the catch that wasn't a catch.
Oh, is this Lions' motive? Is it?
Yeah, well, it's Green Bay get too many nice calls. That's what I'm saying.
Oh God, that was our say the line Bart moment, wasn't it? We were just waiting for the Marvin Jones reference. I mean, a couple of things. Number one. If anybody doesn't know, after he said he encourages trash talk in all competitive environments, Bones is actually a gamer when he's not on the podcast. But I do actually agree. If you look at it, what do most people get into the NFL for? A large part of it is the showmanship, the big hits, the celebrations, those kind of things. I feel like they're sterilizing the game a little bit. I think of course, it's not really an issue for the NFL. They're going to be a big sport no matter what. But you do wonder about the more that they sanitize things, the less interested some people will get. Some of the rough in the pass calls are ridiculous. This whole thing about I can't even remember what the phrase it is. Something about your body weight on a quarterback. It's like, these guys have been hit most of their careers, especially someone like Brady, who's like, what is he, 42 now? The guy's been being hit for 17 years. I highly doubt that somebody landing on him at this stage is like going to break his neck or anything. I just find that I find the whole thing a bit odd. The taunting rule is ridiculous. I think everyone knows that. I think even the officials know that, quite frankly, but it's in the rule book now, so there you are. The issue, I do wonder if the taunting rule will go the way that the celebrations rule did, because if you don't remember, celebrations were sort of verboten up to about 3-4 years ago, and now they're back. So I feel like this will come back. I think roughing the passer is unfortunately here to stay, and if it is, they might as well just put flags in the quarterback's pocket. I think that's the stage it's getting to. But I think the taunting rule, I don't think it's long for this world, unfortunately. I'm just going to throw in a little political commentary. The taunting rule has largely been asked for by NFL owners and coaches who are predominantly white men. I don't think I need to complete that sentence, but think about what the majority of NFL players are and not allowing them the opportunity to express themselves. Just saying, I do think there is a little bit in there. It's happened in the NBA too. It's not a problem unique to the NFL, but it is. I do find it quite instructive that these things just seem to pass without any real opposition, and then the argument always is, "Oh well, the coaches want it." Yeah, of course they do. The boring old white men just suck it up. Let us enjoy our Sundays. God damn it. I'll not talk about officials because then I'll start mentioning holding calls in Super Bowls, and nobody wants to talk about that, do they? So I'll let it go.
Yeah, I think the unsportsmanlike, it makes me laugh that we've gone from Mark says dancing around in the end zone for a couple of years ago where you want to touch the frame of the goal. you got a flag for touching the frame, dunking the ball over, which is ridiculous in itself. But yeah, I'm totally with you all. I want a bit of getting in your face and stuff and everything, as long as it's not too over the line. There's obviously going to be a line, but obviously, if we've got some American listeners, they might not follow cricket, but that's why the sledging makes it more interesting. You know what I mean? That's what we love, in sport. So
don't rip a guy's chain off his neck, but
can't spin a ball. But yeah, moving on. Obviously, on the final one, we've got the Browns helmet there, and obviously we've gone for the Browns AFC Championship bid. Obviously, I was big on it at the start of the season, and obviously they go into the game tonight against I think it's the Broncos, isn't it? And you might as well make a list of who can play. The list that they've got at the moment, and obviously they've had a rough start. Mark, obviously, when we were in the chat, you mentioned this, putting the Browns on there. Is it a big concern now with the Browns this early on? Is it a really uphill battle, especially with the injuries? Obviously, quite a few of them are going to be out for a while.
Every year there seems to be a team who are promising who get blown away by the injury bug. John's team, the 49ers, have kind of had this moniker for the last few years. We saw how poor they looked last year when they were a good team once the injury bug hit. The Chargers have kind of been cursed with it a little bit, but it's been a long time since I've seen so many key starters out injured in one team. We're talking about both running backs, both offensive tackles, the quarterback, a couple of corners, a guard, an all-pro guard at that. I don't want to put them on stock down because they're a good team. But what I want to mention on stock down is their injuries. You know what I mean? Though, it's devastating. No team can compensate. I know their roster's deep, but no team can compensate for them kind of injuries, you know what I mean? Or it's just unlucky, you know what I mean? Unlucky. Because this team a couple of weeks ago looked like they were making a run at that AFC North. But look, hey, if Baker Mayfield's dislocated his shoulder, is he going to come back? What's happening? Case Keenum's going to go in there. He's had one good season. He's a solid backup, but I don't think he's going to carry a team into playoffs. It's just devastating for Bears fans, really, these injuries more than anything. You can't prepare for injuries. You just can't prepare for them, can you?
No, it's like you say, you get one or two, you can maybe get around it, but it's unbelievable. Like everyone, like you mentioned rightfully, everyone gets, certain teams get the injury bug, but this seems like it's unbelievable. Really, you can't write this how bad it is. And I don't know how long some of them are out for. Like I know there's a few that look like they're going to be quite a while and stuff, but you take, like, obviously they have got Baker Mayfield and they've got some good receivers, but you take Chubb and Kareem Hunt out of that, and it's like, Jesus, what can you do? You're going to struggle to move the ball. I know Dimitri Felton is going to come in and come out of college. He's a decent player, but he's not at the level of these two. And it's all I can say is that they need to get him back as quick as possible. Mark, obviously you've got the list now because he's going to reel through it as quick as possible because it's a long one. But you go for it, Mark.
Okay, we have got Odell Beckham did not practice, shoulder. Nick Chubb did not practice, calf. Jadeveon Clowney did not practice. Jack Conklin did not practice. Myles Garrett, limited practice. Malik Jackson, limited practice. Baker Mayfield did not practice, confirmed as out. Malik McDowell, limited practice. Pat McKinley, limited practice. Greg Newsome, limited practice. David Njoku, limited practice. Malcolm Smith, limited practice. JC Tretter did not practice. Denzel Ward, limited practice. Greedy Williams, limited practice. Jedrick Willis, their other offensive tackle, did not practice. Mac Wilson, limited practice. And Jordan Elliott did limited practice. Out of that, okay, you've got a Pro Bowler and Desmond Ward, limited practice. JC Tretter, an All-Pro guard, didn't practice. Both starting OTs didn't practice. The other corner, the rookie, first-round pick, limited practice. Quarterback didn't practice. Neither running back didn't practice. Your big free agent defensive lineman didn't practice. And Myles Garrett, your superstar, limited practice. How can you equate for them kind of injuries? How can anybody survive in the NFL when you're missing so many key players?
Yeah, I mean, geez, I don't even know where to start with that. I mean, it felt a bit like that Allen Iverson interview at one point. We were saying practice that many times, but yeah, I mean, does it feel to anyone else? I'm just going to throw this out there. Does it feel to anyone else like there's a hell of a lot more injuries in the NFL the last 2 years? I'm not just saying at one team. I mean, in general, is it a COVID-related thing? Is it the changes in practice with the new CBA? What is it? Something's obviously happening because a lot of teams are suffering with this now.
I've got an answer to this, John, because one of my mates in the Raiders chat is a physiotherapist and used to be a physio for Bolton Wanderers. There is evidence out there that if you do an exercise over and over and over again, your likelihood of injury lessens. This is a result of there being less of a pre-season, where players aren't doing the movements as much. And it's decreased their amount of practice time by about 25%. And the fact that they've lost a pre-season game, and many of them didn't play in any pre-season games. He brought up a paper, my mate Ryan, if he's watching, shout out to Ryan. We need to get him on because he can talk about injuries. And he's a physio for a football team. And he talks about it's the second that pre-season shrinks, you'll see injuries go up. Because what people want to believe is the more you play, the more likely you're going to get injured. That's actually completely untrue. The more you play, the less likely you are to get injuries.
It's a good shout, that, Mark, to get him on, because obviously I was listening to a Rich Eisman show on Monday, Tuesday, when it must have been Tuesday because they played Monday night. They had Derek Henry on, and he was going through his routine of how he gets ready for the next week. Like the recovery. And it was quite fascinating, the stuff that he actually does. I'll be here all night if I say anything, but he actually has everything going. Getting in the sauna, getting in an ice bath. The deep heat. different massages and stuff you get, with the cupping and the things like that. He was labelling off everything, and he's ready to go every week. So it's a good chance to get him on and just talk about stuff like. Cause obviously, you've got to say your injuries, and there's all the recovery that comes around with it as well. These players who don't practice all week to try and get fit. The stuff that this is the thing. You don't, if you don't follow the American football, and it happens in other sport, you don't see what players go through. Some players are jabbing themselves for injections just to numb the pain to play the next week. I know there's a lot of people that aren't fans of Jamal Adams, but Jamal Adams had a ridiculously bad elbow injury last year, and he was just plugging himself with injections just to numb the pain so he could play each week, and that's affecting your performance as well. That's surely going to wear and tear over the years just by doing that, rather than having a quick fix. It's like you said, JP, about the injuries in the NFL. I feel it in the college as well this year. There's so many injuries in college, people going out, and it's a topic that kind of needs to be touched on. Really, I think it'd be an interesting podcast. So that's one that we might have to bring forward and have a discussion on that. It should be fun. So that concludes Stock Down. MVP race. It's only week 6, but there's some big candidates. We've got to throw this out there. We've been waiting to do this for a while now. We'll appreciate this image from Bones. He's done a fantastic job here. And we'll go with the guy who's leading first and make it interesting. So we're talking about. We've got Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott's. I think we've all agreed how good he is, and obviously how much the Cowboys missed him. And for me personally, I think he's playing lights out football at the moment. He's got some fantastic receivers around him, but he's one of the best passers in the league for me. He's doing some great things down at Dallas. Obviously, I know Mark mentioned earlier, it'd be interesting to see where the defense goes. It was so bad last year. Is he going to start throwing it even more than he is now? Zeke's having a fantastic. Everyone was saying that Zeke's washed up. He's having a fantastic year. Zeke at the moment, he's doing really well. But Dak's got a really good outside chance. I didn't have him in there, to be honest with you, to be anywhere near the MVP this year. But he could have comeback player of the year and MVP the way it's going at the moment. Still a long way to go. Second over there is, I think it's Kyler Murray. Mark's putting his hand up, so I'm going to go to Mark on Kyler Murray. I know how much he loves him. So obviously Kyler Murray started well. Obviously the only unbeaten team as well, but he's been brilliant so far, hasn't he, Mark?
Yeah, I was just, what it is, right? This time last year, I put a bet on at the start of the 2020 season that Dak Prescott would be MVP that year. And he was having an MVP season before his terrible break. I wish I went back and done it again, because I actually knew that. I actually was one of the few who thought Dak Prescott's got MVP type qualities in him. And I backed him last year. And he showed that in the first few games before he smashed his ankle. I thought, I'm rubbing my hands together for the money. And I didn't go back and back him again this year. One person I did back, though, was Kyler Murray. And Kyler Murray's been just fantastic this year, hasn't he? Completion percentage, way over 70%. 74% currently is completion percentage. 14 touchdowns. He's just, and he's just... Yeah, and he's got another 2 rushing as well. So really, he's got 16 touchdowns. And this offense doesn't look like it's slowing down. Tell you what was even more impressive last week. They went and won in Cleveland. But Cliff Kingsbury wasn't even on the sideline. He had COVID or something like that. And I didn't realise that until later on this week. To go there and beat them and do it in such good style, and you don't have your head coach, and it still looked like a dominating offense. You know what I mean? Or considering that their head coach is their play caller on the offensive side of the ball. Yeah, Kyler Murray's just phenomenal. He's such a good player. The talent's there. And I did back him at the start of the year for MVP. And I think currently at the moment, Brady's probably favourite. But Kyler Murray's definitely a close second.
Yeah, it's quite a tight race. I know it's only early as well, and obviously people dwindle out and things. But a guy that's we mentioned Derrick Henry, and we'll come on to him a bit soon, carrying a team. Lamar Jackson is carrying that team, Bones, at the moment, and he's put his best foot forward at the moment. He's already won it once. So obviously he's vying for it again, and it does help. It always helps when someone puts the team on the back of the shoulders and carries them, and that's what he's doing at the moment.
this guy, like you said, this guy's already won an MVP, so we know, first of all, that whoever's voting on the MVP award likes the way Lamar Jackson plays football. It's exciting to watch. Like, I think it is anyway. I said to JP the other week, I think if I wasn't a Lions fan, at some point I'd probably ended up a Baltimore fan because they just run the ball a lot, and I really enjoy watching it. Like, but interestingly, this year I don't think necessarily it's Lamar's legs that are winning Baltimore games. Lamar's had some fantastic passing games this year. Granted, the game against the Chargers I feel like that was primarily a defensive win more than anything else because he didn't. I mean, no one had incredible numbers that game, but there's games where he's been throwing for over 300, 400 yards. He's a good throwing quarterback this year, and he's still got the legs. I really enjoy watching this guy. I think the MVP, like I say, I don't want to go on too much, but I think the MVP award people do like this kind of thing, and it's not necessarily. It's not always who's the best that wins these awards. We've seen that before. There is a bit of popularity and stuff goes into it. So yeah, I think he's in there definitely.
Yeah, I like his chances the way it's going at the moment. I'm same as you, Bones. I love watching him play. I think he's you say like you say his passing's really stepped up this year, and people can say what you want about him. I'm all for players like this, like Mark mentioned, Kyler Murray. I know he's in the Seahawks division rival, but I just can't help but watching him play. The special talents, and you've got, and you mentioned it when we were on about Derrick Henry. You just got to sit back and enjoy these players while they're there. They're such good players to watch, and they give us great games with how they play. Like especially dual threat. I know Mark mentioned Tom Brady as being the favourite probably at the moment. JP, obviously, would you say he's the favourite, and has he got a good chance of winning his fourth MVP?
Yeah, I mean, look, in this group of us, the third and short, both the main and this pod, I am the Brady apologist. Apart from the Tampa Bay fans who strangely became Tom Brady fans about 12 months ago, but I predicted when we were doing predictions for awards, I said Brady for MVP, and there was a few sideways glances, I think. But my reasoning was that if he had anything approaching a good season, because of the fact that he has got that story behind him, what is he now, 42, 43? If he leads him to another Super Bowl or he gets him into the playoffs and it looks like they're going to win it, I think he's a shoo-in. And to be honest, the way he's playing at the moment in that offense, I think he's played about as well as he's played for years. We're not seeing a guy playing within a system here. This guy is the system at the moment. And they're going into games that most people are not expecting. I wouldn't say not expecting them to win, but expecting them to have a tough time, and they're blowing teams out. And it's in large part because of all the touchdown passes he's throwing. So it's really hard to rule him out. It's the same reason that Bones said about Lamar. People do like these backstories. People do like these things. But also he's playing at a top level. It's impossible to say that he's not. So I'd be surprised if he's not. If Tampa continue, if they don't do the reverse of what they did last season and suddenly fall apart halfway through the season, I think he's going to be up there at the end of the year.
Yeah, and obviously we had Derrick Henry on stock up. The way he's going, he's going to obviously with that extra game, he's going to beat the records of rushing yards. If he carries on like that, he breaks the record. Surely has a good chance of winning it. I'll just throw a question out there. I don't know if anyone knows the answer to it. Do you know the last non-quarterback or running back? Do you know who won the MVP? Is that
Chris Johnson, maybe, at the Titans?
It was Adrian Peterson in 2012. That was the last time a non-quarterback won it. And obviously, I think even before that, it was, I can't remember, I think it was Daniel Tomlinson or Sean Alexander. I can't remember which way around it was, but it was one of them. So they don't win it that often. But Mark, do you think if he carries on like this, obviously I know it's going to be hard to overturn a quarterback. You've got it's guy. You can argue it will be it can be a biased vote, but surely if he does end up breaking the record, which is a long way away, he's got a massive chance. Surely
they kind of brought in the offensive player award, didn't they? To kind of negate, because look, MVP awards are dominated by quarterbacks. So the offensive player award, I think, is Derrick Henry's at this moment in time. I think he is the best offensive player. Is he the MVP? Well, look, is he in a leadership role? Is he carrying a team on his back? Like, let's face it, most quarterbacks do. And we talked about Henry earlier. You have to say, yeah, the answer's a yes to that. He's leading that team and he's carrying them on his back. So whilst he certainly warrants this, I do ultimately think it's going to go to one of the quarterbacks because it really always does. But I don't think he's nailed on for the offensive player of the year if he keeps this pace up.
I agree with you. I do think it is worth thinking about, though, what Jordan mentioned with the record. If he beats Eric Dickerson's record that has stood since 1984, that is one of those storybook situations that they might make a big deal out of. I think you're right, though. I think it will end up being Offensive Player of the Year award rather than MVP. But that's a pretty big record to beat, and it's normally one they do make a big fuss out of when someone gets there. So it'll be interesting because I think, do you say the last time was AP? Which year was that? 2012?
I think, 2012, 2011. I think
the year he set the second most single season rushing yards just behind Eric Dickerson was the year he won the MVP. It'll be interesting, but I definitely think he's in with a shout. I think there's other honourable mentions, but
I was just about to come over to you, Bones, there, because I'm sure there's an honourable mention you'd like to bring up.
I still stand by, especially at this point in the season. I think Stafford's definitely well and truly in that conversation now. I don't think you can say he's not. I mean, if you want a Cinderella story in the NFL, a guy comes from Detroit, the perennial terrible team in the league, goes to the Rams and has a storybook season, potentially goes to the Super Bowl. That's worthy of it. I don't care, and he's passing well. He's up there in most of the statistics as passing. It hurts as a Lions fan a little bit watching this because it goes to show we could have always got it done with Stafford. We just never built the right team around him, and that's kind of sad.
I was going to come back to with that, and like I say, even though these people have got a head start, you look like Mark, since you've got Tom Brady and Kyler Murray, probably paving the way. There's still a long way to go, and obviously we've got Herbert, and obviously Mark put in the chat Carr. Obviously, I know Herbert had a knockoff week last week, but there's still a long way to turn that back around, and still a good 11, 12 games, 10, 11 games to go, and it's still all to play for a few just hanging behind, such as Herbert and Carr. So yeah, it's even though we've got the front runners there, we'll keep coming back to this each week, and we'll talk a bit more on some maybe people who will come back into the race and people will drop off. So it'll be a fun thing to watch all season, and obviously Mark's got his money on Kyler Murray. I'd probably put my money on Lamar just because I like him and how well he's doing, but it could be anyone's, let's be honest. Really good. So moving on from the MVP race, obviously I'm going to move on to my segment of rookie performance of the week, and it's two probably. I kept it secret this week, so it's two guys that I didn't think I don't think you would have guessed mentioned. And first off, I just wanted to give a shout out to Khalil Herbert of the Chicago Bears. The running back, he's come in from injuries, and he's a guy that I had as a late pick in the draft, thinking that it could be a steal. And he's still, I don't know how long he'll stay around for. He might take a back seat, but he finished with 97 yards from 19 rushes for the Bears against the Packers defense. And like I say, I think he looks like he's going to be playing next week, but if he keeps up them numbers, it's going to be hard to knock him out eventually. And he's he had a good game. And the second one, obviously, Mark mentioned the Panthers defense, and I think Mark's going to start having a go at me soon because it's another Husky player. But Keith Taylor Jr. had a fantastic game at cornerback. He came in. Jesse Horns on injured IR, and he came in and he had a fantastic game, and he come up against people like, don't forget, these are good route runners in Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, and he held his own. He had a 82.8 grade in run defense and 71.1 in coverage. He let Thielen score a touchdown, which he had good coverage on, to be honest with you. Just a fantastic throw from Cousins, and he had some fantastic breakups and kept up with Adam Thielen. I know he's getting on a bit, but he kept up with Justin Jefferson on a few as well. And to come in on his, he only had a few snaps last week when he came in for injured cornerbacks. This was his first full game. He had a really good game, and I just thought I'd shout him out as well. And hopefully, like you say, it's such a packed Panthers defense, and I thought hopefully he can carry it on because I really did like him as a Husky player. And they probably could do even this year because they're struggling. So I think them two. I just had to shout them out. Obviously, I could easily run Jamar Chase again, but it's so boring to keep saying Jamar Chase. We know he's a good player, but again, Jamar Chase had a fantastic week. JP, Oline of the weeks. Was it a hard one?
Yeah, well, it got kind of thrown into disarray at the last minute. I had the Vikings because they basically let Kirk Cousins run the show, I thought. And that Panthers front, as we've talked about numerous times, is pretty damn good. I still think I would probably just about go for them, but the Titans came back into the discussion. Obviously, the difficulty with judging the Titans' O-line is Henry's just a freak anyway. So, how good is his line? I don't really know the answer to that question. I think I go with the Vikings just on the basis that they were facing a really good front. I can't immediately think of a ton of players that stand out on the O-line, and yet they kept Cousins clean. And to be honest, we talked about Cousins earlier, to be honest, if you do that, I think you'll get decent production out of him. They don't do it that often, so if they can find that consistency through the rest of the season, I think they'll have a pretty good second half of the year.
Yeah, we're good. I watched that game in 14. It were a good game. I thought the Panthers played well as well. The defense got going late on, but I thought the defense still played well. Like I say, they were good protection, but the defensive backs had some good games, like I mentioned, and it were a fun game. But like I said, like you did say, they protected him well, and he did his business and got him the win. So moving on to week 7 this week, there's one game that I'm going to leave for Bones. I know I want to talk about it, so I'm going to leave it there. But for me, the game that I was looking at was, I think Mike mentioned the Bengals, how surprising they've been this year, and they've got a big one against the Ravens on Sunday at 6 o'clock. That's a good game to see where the Bengals actually are. And I'm not sure if that's a Sky game. I don't know if Mark will be talking that Saturday. I haven't actually seen the Sky schedule, but obviously tune in on 12 o'clock and they'll talk you through the Sky Sports games this week. And yeah, that's one I'm really looking forward to, and I'll move on to Bones because I know what I want to talk about. It's the homecoming in it, Bones.
Well, it's going to be a tough one, isn't it? I think we're first and foremost, we're going to LA. So it's not like, isn't it? We're playing them in their stadium, aren't they?
I think you are, yeah, sorry.
Yeah. I was going to say that it's Goff's homecoming, I suppose, more than Stafford's. But I think Aaron Donald's probably going to murder Jared Goff, and B, it's gonna hurt to get torn up by Matt Stafford, isn't it? I mean, I've heard people talking about, when you go back to play your old team, sometimes you don't necessarily do as well because there's a lot of emotions involved, but based on the way our secondary is playing this year and what we're going up against here, we're just going to get demolished. And I think a lot of Lions fans are going to be sat there like, oh, he used to play for us. And that's basically going to be my Sunday.
Mark, obviously, there's a few teams on buys this week. I think there's quite a handful, actually, because I was looking at my fantasy team thinking, bloody hell, I've got no wide receivers this week. So is there anything that you see this week that takes your fancy?
It's a really trashy schedule this week. There's nothing that really picks out. I mean, you've mentioned the game, which I think that's probably the most interesting one, which is the Bengals and the Ravens. Obviously, I'm going to be watching the Raiders against the Eagles. That's going to be an interesting game. We said, didn't we, last week when we were doing the show, the Raiders going to combust or they're going to be galvanized. And look, that performance against Denver, against a very good Denver D, to put up that many points it's similar to Kirk Cousins going up against a very good Carolina D. That Denver D is good, bloody really good, and we made a mockery out of them. So I'm interested to see the Raiders again, not only because I'm a fan, but I want to see, I just want to see if they are galvanizing. It certainly appeared so last week. Other than that, there's really nothing much that interests us. Kansas against Tennessee. That looks a pretty good game, but I expect Kansas to go there, and I just can't see the Tennessee D stopping them. But then again, they just stopped the Bills, didn't they? So
1 yard away from winning the game, they stopped the Bills, no less. They stopped that Josh Allen quarterback sneak on the goal line.
Do you know what was the funniest thing about that, though? When the commentator said that if Tyler Lewan was in there, and you're like, Tyler Lewan doesn't even play for the Bills. He plays for the other team. You know what I mean? And he was ranting on. He was going crazy about if they didn't have the backup OT in, Dawkins, who is the starting left tackle for the Bills. And he was going crazy about going, if they had Tyler Lewan in, Josh Allen would have got that sneak. And you're like, he plays for the other team, you idiot, man. Plays for the other team. Never played for the Bills. Has never worn a Bills jersey. You know what I mean? Though, is the starting tackle for the Titans. I mean, yeah, that was comical. But yeah, that was the best bit about that 1 yard play, Bones. You know.
JP, your 49ers are back, but is there another game that you're looking forward to apart from that one?
I think Mark's right. There's not a lot jumping out this week. I've actually gone with 2 games, and one of them is my team's. And I've picked both games for similar reasons. It's both the primetime games, the Sunday and the Monday. We got the Saints and the Seahawks, and the Colts and the 49ers. These are 4 teams that were considered to be potentially in, up there this year, that all haven't sparkled for different reasons. The Saints have got Jameis Winston at quarterback, so that answers that one. We've got our problems calling offensive plays. The Colts, it just isn't working with Wentz. The Seahawks, I don't really know what's going on at the Seahawks, Jordan. It just feels a bit like, I don't know, it feels a bit like you're just treading in place at the minute. You're winning games here and there, but you seem to be finding ways to lose games, a bit like us, really. So I think all 4 teams are going in with something to prove. So, I mean, you look at it, and the loser of the Colts 49ers game is pretty much out of the race for the year. And the Saints and Seahawks, okay, yeah, the Saints might still be in it if they lose, but you would have to say it's looking tough for them at that point. So 4 teams with a lot on the line, even this early in the season. It should hopefully make for some desperate football and maybe a couple of decent games. I'm certainly hoping so. Otherwise, staying up till 4:30 to watch it will be a very painful experience. But we'll see how it goes.
Stay with me here for one last one, though, that I think could be interesting to watch. Jets-Patriots. Patriots had a pretty good game last week. Mac Jones did all right. He had his first decent game of the year, really. And I'm interested to see if he can keep... I know the Jets is a pretty easy defense to walk all over, but I do think it'll be a good one to watch, just to see if he can keep that form up like he did really well last week.
Yeah, so I salute you, JP, for going to stay up and watching the 49ers, because I don't think I'll be staying up to watch Geno Smith against, after last week. I stayed up and watched him against Steelers, and yeah, I don't know if I'll be doing that again. I'll probably watch it in the morning or something.
We'll see how it goes, though. I might give it a quarter or 2. It might be one of them where if it's 28-0 at half time, it might be like, you know what, I value a couple of hours extra sleep more than I do watch us get blown out by Indianapolis.
Yeah, I'm the same. I don't want to see as Geno Smith and Jameis Winston potentially run all over us, which would be, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing thinking about it, but it could well happen. So as always, we end up with Mystic Mark Bet of the Week. What have you got for us this week?
You know, I really fancy this week for tight ends. I'm really looking at these matchups. I'm like, I can see tight ends scoring some touchdowns this week. So I'm going to take 2 trebles, and I'm going to be a little bit bold. I'm expecting the odds will be quite good for both of them. I'm going to go for a tight end treble, anytime touchdown scores. I'm going to go for Kyle Pitts to maintain his hot streak after scoring his first touchdown last week. So I'm going to go Pitts, Kelsey, and I'm going to go George Kittle. Is a anytime touchdown treble on the tight ends. And I really fancy a speedster wide receivers tight end treble. So I'm going to go Henry Ruggs, Tyreek Hill, and Brandon Cooks. 3 speedster wide receivers to get anytime touchdowns as well. So there's a fast wide receiver treble, and there's a big tight end treble for you.
Well, I've wrote them down there, so I'll be putting them on, and I'll be watching them on Sunday. It'll be something to watch, and I enjoy touchdown.
Do you want to cover them on the double as well? Just cover yourself on the double, so you know if like 2 of them come in, you know that you're going to have a bit of a pay-off as well.
Yeah,
to cover them on the double as well, Jordan.
Thank you very much, Johnny Preacher. And on that note, we will see you next week. Thank you for tuning in, and enjoy your Week 7 coverage, whoever you're supporting and whoever you're watching. Thank you very much.